Welcome to the Brute Strength Podcast, bringing you worldwide experts from all areas of health and fitness. We cover training, nutrition, coaching, and mindset. Welcome your host, strength and conditioning coach, 2012 and 2013 CrossFit Games champ, Michael Cazayoux. Mind, body, brute.
Hello and welcome back. My name is Mike Cazayoux, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week's guest is John Berardi. John is the founder of Precision Nutrition, and our first episode together, episode 78, is the most downloaded show I've ever done, and I've received so much engagement and positive comments on the show that I had to get this dude back. He's also been one of my biggest idols in the health and fitness industry, so it was a pleasure to get to do this with him again today. We started out talking about, and I didn't plan this at all, but we talked for several minutes about wisdom. And the reason is because John is one of the wisest men that I know. And so we talked about how he became that way and kind of his process for becoming more wise. We also talked about mentorship and finding good mentors and how to go about finding them. And then we talked about nutrition, obviously. We talked about gut health. We talked about instilling positive habits in children. We talked about the 80-20 principle and the big things that you should be focusing on in your nutrition that will have the biggest effect. This one was just as good, if not better, as the first one, and I know you guys are going to love it. If you haven't done so already, I would really appreciate if you leave me a quick iTunes review. And if you love the show, share it and subscribe. Enjoy.
John, thank you so much for joining me again, man. How are you?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed our last chat. Last time we did the podcast, it was one of my favorites, to be honest. And I'm not just saying that because you're talking with me right now. So it's a real pleasure to come back and have another conversation.
Oh, you say that to all the girls, don't you?
I wish. Man. I wish they were all amazing conversations, but yeah. Alas, I really enjoyed ours, man.
Well, the feeling is mutual, man. And not only for the technical things that we talked about and the knowledge about nutrition that I gained from you, but you're one of the wisest people that I've talked to on here, and I really, really respect and admire the way that you seem to be going through life. You're looking for it looks like you're truly looking for or looking to live the most holistic life possible, and you're doing things on a very high level. And I'm just excited to dive further into you as a human being, and obviously talk more about some nutrition.
That's cool, man. Well, thanks. I really appreciate that. You know, the wisdom comment in particular always hits me in the feels because some people have been kind enough to say that, and that's been my sort of life's goal for the last, let's call it 10 years. I don't think wisdom is something that just accrues as a matter of time on the earth or whatever. I think it's actually something you have to cultivate. And it's something that I decided I wanted to cultivate. How can I be the kind of person that sort of really integrates, experience and insight and knowledge and learning into sort of a way of seeing the world that's close to true and that's kind and that's useful and all those things. And so, when people pick up on it, it makes me feel really good because it didn't start that way. It's something I've tried to work really hard on.
Was there kind of a turning point for you, or was it just a gradual kind of attraction towards this concept of wisdom?
There actually was kind of a turning point. It probably wasn't a moment, but there was this realization I had years ago where, early in my life, I was ambitious and very aspirational. So I wanted to accomplish big things. So I'd always be trying to just squeeze the world for mentorship. You know what I mean? Like, who's out there? Who can teach me? How can I get help and guidance? And then all of a sudden, one day I woke up and I realized, oh wow, I'm getting so many requests for me to mentor people. I hadn't made the shift in my mind that, oh, wait a second, this feels like the time in my life where it's going to switch. It just kind of crept up so slowly. Well, I'm still out looking for mentorship, but then when I look at my calendar, I'm like, oh, I've actually given mentorship more hours this week than I've gotten it. And then I was like, oh wow, there's a burden of responsibility on me now to make sure that when people come to me for advice, I'm not just making up some shit. You know what I mean? That I've actually thought a lot of these things through and that they're well considered. And so it was that moment of saying like, oh, what does it mean to be looking for mentorship and giving mentorship? What ratio of that would I like in my life? And also being really careful, because as my reputation grew or my popularity or whatever, more and more people would be asking for mentorship, and I could wake up one day receiving no additional mentorship. In other words, I'd be stagnant.
Right.
I'd just be giving. I'd never be filling up my own cup. And that's when I thought, well, what would it mean? What would it mean to move into this next phase? And I'm in my mid 40s now, so as I've gotten older, I realized, there's not going to be tons of people who've, let's say, accomplished more than me or whatever the case may be. And not to sound arrogant, but you just start running out of, when you're 21, I'm like, there's millions of people I can learn from. As I've gotten older, it's like, no, the pool diminishes. So how can I very proactively cultivate and curate a kind of wisdom through reading, through certain life practices, through connecting with people who are smarter or wiser than me, so that fills up my cup. So then I've got more to give to the people who come to me. So it was right around that time all these ideas were coalescing, where I'm like, hey, I need to take on a project, not to learn how to be a good mentor or whatever, but to cultivate wisdom, so that who cares if people come to me for advice or not, that I'm practicing and living the kind of life that I want to live. And then I think that naturally spills over into good advice giving, if you will.
Is there a ratio that you've kind of settled on, the mentor to mentee relationship?
No, because I feel like it comes in waves. There's times of the year and my work cycle and my personal cycle where let's say I need to learn something new. For example, last year, Precision Nutrition, our company, for the first time ever, decided to take on some investment. And so a private equity company came in, they're an amazing group, and bought a large percentage of Precision Nutrition, with Phil, the co-founder, and myself retaining a small percentage of it. So leading up to that, that was uncharted territory for me, right? Like, we had never done this. I've never experienced this. You only know what you've read in books and saw in movies. So last year was a big mentorship or receiving mentorship year for me. It was like, hey, I'm about to walk into a room with the lights off and I don't know where any of the furniture is, So I really sought out a lot of help, and I found a lot of great people and made some great relationships as a result of that. So last year was like a ton of, learning for me. This year it shifted back towards me mentoring, because now with this recent shift in our company, we've hired a bunch of executives, managers and leaders. So people who are going to be taking over a lot of the work that I used to do. So now my whole week is basically coaching people, mentoring people. So, I think it depends on what you're trying to do and what stage of life you're in, and it'll shift constantly. And I love that, it's this constant reminder, like, be present, be thoughtful, ask questions of your life. What do I need now? What's important to me now? What will help take me to the next level? And you have to keep doing that, presumably till the day you die,
Absolutely, man. And I didn't even plan on going down this route, but now that we're here, a couple of things. First off, congratulations on the recent success, man. It's much, much deserved. Now, you mentioned just now asking yourself questions like, what matters to me now? What's your process for doing that? Do you have any rituals, like, say, every 3 months I spend a day, revisiting my vision and goals, etc.? Are there any rituals, and if so, what are they?
I actually consider it like a weekly practice for me. A lot of my work recently, and again, folks maybe at the beginning of their career are going to do less of this, but they certainly shouldn't do none, has been, how do I do like a time inventory to see what I'm spending my time on, figure out what things can be totally dispensed with, like this isn't bringing value. Seeing what things can be automated or systematized, so it takes much less time to do. Seeing what things can be outsourced, this is someone else can do it. And then leaving time in my calendar for, let's call it like thinking, and it's not as passive as that sounds, but I actually have blocks of time in my week where I just sit in my office and I think. And so, thinking is usually an active process for me. So it may mean I pull up like a mind mapping software and I just start dropping in ideas and try and map out my thoughts on things. Another way of thinking might be, I'm going to read up on something. Another way of thinking may be, I'm going to find some believable experts on a topic that I've been thinking a lot about and get their take on it. And hopefully find some experts who disagree so I can kind of pit them against each other in a friendly, collaborative way, and learn that way. So there's actually just time in my schedule every week for, I write on my Google Calendar thinking, right?
Yep.
And then I block it out so no one can invite me to a meeting or an appointment or anything like that. Sometimes my wife thinks it's weird or whatever. She'll be like, "What are you doing in there? You're not doing anything?" I'm like, "I'm thinking." She's like, "Okay, well then you can help me with this." I'm like, "No, actually I can't."
That's funny.
This is probably the most important scheduling event of my week, So that's really it. I book time aside, and what might I be thinking about? Well, it might be a precision nutrition problem or opportunity. It might be having something to do with what's really, really important to me in my personal life, which is being a good parent. We've got an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and I'm constantly wanting to level up as a dad and do my best for them. So I might be thinking about those kind of problems, and that may lead me down the road to like reading about developmental psychology and trying to come up with some kind of theory of parenting or whatever. So it's just whatever's most salient or whatever I'm trying to work on the most at the time, or whatever challenges have come up that are, what we might call limiting factors or constraints. A constraint has come up, something's in the way of growth. How can I see my way through that?
How interesting is it that we have all of this intuition and just intuition inside of us? Like we know what we need and what we want out of life, but the only time we really get in touch with that is when we do something like you suggested, right? When we have some space, when we're on a walk, when we're in the shower, when we're backpacking or camping or something like that. And it's not rewarded in our society, and so it's so rare.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever read Susan Cain's book, Quiet, The Power of Introverts.
No.
It was I read it as an adult, as a 40-year-old or whatever. And so it wasn't life-changing for me, but it was really kind of life-affirming. If I was 20 and I had gotten a hold of that book, which hadn't been written at that time, it would have been life-changing. Because I grew up as a natural introvert, so I spent tons of time alone. And, part of the introvert profile is this idea that, and it often is associated with being preemie, so born premature, which I was. And some of it is just a central nervous system. It's the idea that sights and sounds and noise, all of that's sort of amplified for someone with a certain nervous system profile, and that happens to be often correlated with being born premature and being an introvert. So I remember growing up, like my mom she was a shopaholic. She would always take me to the mall. And after going to the mall, just as a kid or a teenager, I'd have to go in my room and like shut the lights off and shut the blinds and like somehow just recover, And I never understood that. I always thought it was weird. And I always thought wanting to spend all this time alone was weird. And I always thought it was like a character flaw, like I was weak or whatever. And, as I've come to learn, it's actually a superpower if used appropriately. Like I like all this time alone, and, that's a great time to do the things we're talking about. So I'm like, most of the things in my life that I've done well, I haven't been just me sitting around going, I'm going to pull myself up by the bootstraps and learn to do these well. It's just like a happy accident,
Right.
So this enjoying time alone, then figuring out what to do with that time alone, which is read great books or think or whatever, happens to be a real advantage in what I do. And I came by it by accident, by being born, 6 weeks premature. And so for me, I feel like if you're an extrovert, this would be much harder to do. And I have a lot of compassion for that because most of the extroverts I know, this isn't the first thing they would think to do.
Sure. But it's something that can definitely be trained. I think I'm definitely more on the extrovert side. I've got a bit of both, like most people, but it's something that I've had to consciously train to allow myself to just sit by myself with my thoughts and not allow myself to be distracted.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's required for both, introverts, extroverts, and anything on that spectrum. But and you bring up a great point, which is the training aspect. I mean, everything. I have this belief that almost everything is trainable. I mean, maybe if you're 5 feet tall, you're not going to dunk a basketball.
Right.
There's probably not a lot of training modalities that are going to get you there, but a lot of the kind of stuff we're talking about here, I think, is trainable, and that's probably one of the most important points in my life, which is. If that's true, then nearly any aptitude or skill that I want to develop, I can, if I want to, and if I set out a good plan and I get the right guidance on how to do it.
Beautiful. My last thing on this, and then we'll move on. I've noticed, so bringing it back to mentorship, I've also, I've always been similar to how you're describing. I'm constantly looking for mentors in every different area of my life, and over the past several years I've noticed more and more people reaching out to me for that. I'm sure a tiny fraction of what you're used to, but I've experienced it to some degree, and I've noticed, and I've read a lot of Tim Ferriss stuff and heard him talk about like the best way to approach mentors and whatnot, and I've noticed in myself there are certain people that I'm just way more likely to help because of how they approach me. So my question to you is how do you like to be approached? And the reason I'm asking is for anyone listening, you want to know how to appropriately ask someone to mentor you in a very non-threatening way to their time and energy.
Totally. Yeah. It's a great question. And, I mean, I can list some strategies for sure, which I will. But part of it, strategies are only helpful for me personally when there's like an undergirding philosophy behind it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so tell me how I have to set my mind when I'm about to approach a process, and I'll figure out the strategies myself, versus tell me the strategies, because if you just try and do the strategies and your mind's not right, they won't work anyway,
right? Right.
So when it comes to this, I think the undergirding philosophy is that I need to think about that other person. I have to put myself in their shoes first, right? So if you're looking for mentorship, it's because you're ambitious. It's because you're aspirational. It's because you want to go out and accomplish something and you're not going to let anything stand in your way. So you're like, that person over there is a vehicle to my end, which is personal growth or some kind of accomplishment. They're going to smell that a mile away. If you want to mentor with someone, if you look up to them that much, they're probably really smart, and intuitive, and they're going to see it. They're going to smell it. They're going to sense it. And people like that are annoying. They really are. Yep. They can see that you see them as just a tool to be used in the service of your aspiration and ambition. And they're not going to want to work with you. By contrast, if you put yourself in their shoes and think, okay, what do they want out of this interaction? The mentor. Why on earth would they even mentor me in the first place? I'll give you an example. Phil, our co-founder, has forged a really great personal and professional relationship with Ray Dalio, who's one of the top 5 wealthiest people in the world.
Interesting. I heard you saying, what was it? Believable experts and pitting them against each other. I thought that was straight out of what's his recent book?
Oh, yeah. Principles. That's right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, like Phil and I were fortunate to be exposed to all these principles before they were in the book. Phil actually was the reason that book came to be.
Wow.
And I can tell that story later if you want. But that, like, people always ask, well, how do I create, how do I make a relationship with someone like Ray? And I'm like, the first thing you have to understand is Ray doesn't want to have a relationship with you. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's a busy dude. right? Like his life is nothing like yours. You can't fathom the things that he's trying to balance or manage or whatever. Now, it's not to say don't try and strike a relationship with him, because Phil did, and it's been very beneficial. I think for both Ray and for Phil. But you just have to understand, you're not on a level playing field. That Ray has no reason to want to mentor Phil. So you have to think, what could he get out of it? And the thing that a mentor gets out of it, if it goes well, is that the mentee is someone who's thoughtful, smart, understands their place in the interaction, and the only way they can pay the mentor back is by listening closely and then going and implementing the things that the mentor recommends, in a thoughtful way, right? That's the only thing you can pay a mentor with, by being super cool, super human, listening. Just shut the hell up. You don't have anything to contribute in the advice component here.
Right.
You might have different life experiences and stuff. That's great. Bring that for sure. Be a human. But, so, you've seen this, Mike. Someone comes in and they're looking for mentorship, and then when you talk, they talk over you. And it's like, yeah, man, you're doing it wrong.
Right, right.
This is the time for you to be quiet and for me to talk. And then you just go out and do some of that stuff. And then you just report back in a super cool, non-time consuming way. Like, hey, remember that thing you recommended or taught me? It's really working out. I used it to this effect, and thank you. People who are at that station in life want to help smart people who are action takers. They just do, they consider it part of their legacy. So if you be that, smart, thoughtful, cool, human, take their advice, don't contradict them, don't talk over them, don't pretend you know what you don't know. And then you just go and implement it. And then you just report back like, hey, I implemented the thing and it worked. Thank you. Like this is important and I'm grateful. That's the payment. That's the only thing you got to pay these kind of people with.
Right.
So those are the steps. I mean, one, think about it from the mentor's perspective. What could they need or want out of this? Well, make sure that's what you focus on. Number two, approach them like a human being. Like I know when you're treating me like a famous person who you can learn from, and that's different from a guy who has a life of his own. Like here's a great example. I'm at an event and someone approaches me and they want to form a professional relationship, and I've got one or two or three or four of my kids with me, and they don't acknowledge my children.
Oh.
That, like, you don't have to be like down on the ground playing with them. You know what I mean? But if you don't acknowledge their presence, it tells me you're not treating us like human beings.
Right.
And so I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to work with you. You know what I mean? You're there. Like, it's clear they're trying to get the kids out of the way so they can squeeze me for what they want.
Yep.
That's not going to happen. The people you want to approach are too smart to fall for that. So it's just show up as a human, listen, know your place. And that doesn't mean you're subservient. I've had great people who've come to me for advice, who then have sent me really great gifts or sent me great opportunities I'd never have been exposed to otherwise. So they can bring value in different ways. And then just be humble and cool. Know what you don't know. Don't try and impress me with what you do know. And then take my advice and put it into play. That's, I think, the best I can do in terms of helping people see how to show up as a mentee.
Yeah, that's phenomenal advice. And I think the strategies and the tactics of like how to go about that kind of falls into place if people are coming from that mindset. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, that's my take is when your head is set right, then you can express your own individuality, right? You can approach mentors in different ways, and people can do it differently based on who they are, as long as their head's on right, as long as they understand the goal and what they're trying to accomplish. Because if they don't, then it's going to be a mistake. They're not going to do it well, regardless of what they try.
Right. You talk a lot about attention and presence and how nutrition can teach you a sense of awareness. So first off, where did you start to get these ideas? Because these are way outside the norm in your field?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's funny because, meditation's becoming a thing and mindfulness and all that. And I remember in 1993, I didn't call it meditation at the time, but I was I was competitive bodybuilder and power lifter and played university football. And I got a hold of all these books on, I read a lot about physiology and biochemistry, but then I got a hold of all these books on sort of sports psychology. So I was kind of really into that. And they would, back then they would just call it like visualization, right? And so I used to basically meditate. I used to have this sort of particular kind of meditation practice that was kind of constructed from this idea of visualization. And that's been something that's been with me ever since, just this idea like, how do I find a quiet space? Back then my practice was dark, quiet room, lay out on the floor, splay myself out, limbs, arms separate. And you know how people will take you through like the equivalent of a mind-body scan where you think about your toes and you move up to your ankles and you move up to your shins. And, that was my practice. I would do that to get into the meditative or visualization state, and then I'd go for a clear mind. Then I'd go for sort of like a goal-orientated kind of thought process once I was clear. And I just realized, oh man, these are the kind of places where you make your best, most rational, most sober decisions. And so, it's manifested in many ways. And I mean, it even comes out in our work at PN now where, we go and set aside time to do strategic thinking and decision making. And then we log it because we know that that's the clearest we're going to be this year, right? Like
Yes.
In the middle of stress, in the middle of all kinds of, new inputs, we may lose the thread of sobriety that led us to making that decision. So we want to keep looking back at that and be like, hey, just a reminder to ourselves. We made that decision when we were clear thinking. We're not clear thinking right now. Now, that's not to say new data won't shape the approach, but it is to say that, mindfulness, presence, all this stuff, 2 decades ago, what I mean, was in my life. And it's 25 years ago, actually. And the value is at any level of anything you want to do. Like clear thinking is super important to me. I often call it lucid thinking, and it's one of my number one values. And so it's like, cool, how do you get into the space where you can do lucid thinking? And then how do you log that? So in the course of your regular life, which is full of distractions, I know mine certainly is, we've got a team of, over 100 people, close to 120 people. I've got, 7 people living in my house. In the world of distraction, how can I go back to that place where I was clear thinking and remind myself, oh yeah, I made that decision when I was clear?
Isn't it funny how that almost exact same state of mind is the state of mind in which we are our best athletes, that we are most connected to others, that we are happiest and like most serene, all of those things in one?
It is true. It becomes this centered place of, whatever you call it, simplicity, right? Like all the distraction falls away and you just go, oh yeah, my number one goal as a whatever athlete, human, team member is really simple and clear to me now. It's all the other inputs are, and I think this is why a lot of business leaders now are talking about mindfulness and meditation, because you need it. I mean, there's so many inputs that are pinging around, and that you have to consider. There need to be some moments, and if you don't carve aside time for them, you're not going to get them. Where it's like, oh yeah, this is the point.
Right.
Oh yeah, this is what I'm actually going after. This is the most important thing. I always love that saying, like the most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing.
Yes.
And it's really hard to do, so that's why you need a saying like that to remind yourself.
Yeah. I've been really into journaling lately, and I've meditated for many years, and I think this has been the most productive it's ever been, because I'm taking insights that I get throughout the day, and I'm kind of solidifying them and making them concrete by writing about them and then sharing about them. So an example from the other day, I was on a dove hunt, and I've been consistently meditating, and it kind of goes in waves. Sometimes I'll go some time without, and then I'll get consistent. I've been consistent recently, and I was hunting, and one of the guys was off talking to the guide, and the rest of us were hunting, and we were kind of in a big circle bird hunting. And the story in my head went something like, oh, he's such a kiss ass. He's over there networking, kind of a bunch of things bashing this guy. And then I noticed this feeling in my stomach, and I noticed that it was jealousy. And I was jealous or envious rather, that this guy has an ability to really just connect with anyone and make anyone feel kind of special. And because of that, I noticed that feeling in my stomach had created this story to try to make that feeling go away. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so that's a super powerful insight, because I could have gone and I could have treated this guy differently because I thought he was a kiss ass and he was just being kind of inauthentic, but he really wasn't. I was just creating this bullshit story to make my envy go away. And so I go and I write this down. And so, yeah, again, the reason I'm bringing this up is because the journaling is allowing me to make these things more concrete, like it's like a bigger deal in my head. And then I can go and expand on these ideas.
Yeah, I love this. Honestly, this is one of my superpowers, I think. It's the ability to take those things and learn from them, because I don't want to make that same mistake again.
Right.
Like if I'm you, right? I don't want to, next time I see someone doing something similar, or it's in a totally different context. So it's not dove hunting, but it's something else, and then do the same shit over again. Right. You know what I mean? It's like, man, this is an insight that I want to grow from, and not only did you do the hard thing of recognizing it, we call it noticing and naming in PN nutrition coaching, notice and name. So I notice I'm feeling a thing. I saw this thing happening. I had no reason to interpret it or even feel a thing, but I felt a thing. Oh, what I'm going to name what I'm interpreting here. I'm interpreting it as that guy being a kiss ass or whatever. And then I'm going, but do I feel that? Is that what's happening? So then you ask a question of the thing you named, like non-judgmentally, right? Like not, oh, I'm such an asshole. No, just non-judgmentally. Is that true? The question over the course of the day, I ask myself more than any other. Is that true? And then you learned, oh, it's not true. And you're like, okay, cool. Now, how do I move forward in life? How do I not make this mistake again? You're going to make tons of other mistakes, but how do you not make the one hour? Like, who wants to retread old ground, especially when it was a mistake?
Right.
I think personally, when I talk about meditation, I don't need a list of 100 things that it does or whatever. The one thing that it's done for me is give me an extra beat in my life, an extra half second after I've made an inappropriate judgment, because I still do those judgments that you just talked about constantly. I consider it one of my biggest personal weaknesses. When something happens that I'm not a fan of, or I don't like, or didn't go my way, my first thing is, who do I blame? I just start scanning the horizon for someone to blame. Meditation's given me the extra half second to not actually blame them out loud, so that I can then go, is that true? And then go, of course it isn't, and then get to a better place. So, and the journaling idea, I think, is great because it gives you the practice then of saying, okay, let's unpack this. Let's take a moment to unpack this so I can learn. And I've been doing this for so long now that I feel like I have so many insights on the way that I'm about to behave. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I can warn people, like, hey, this thing is happening, so this is going to be what I'm about to do. I'm going to try not to do it, but if you sense it, I'm going to apologize in advance. Give me an extra moment to make it right, or whatever, Yeah. And I can see other people about what other people are about to do too. It's like having a crystal ball that sees like 1 to 3 minutes in the future.
Right. Do you have any insight on or ideas on how to, or just how you personally make sure you're not making the same mistake twice? And obviously you're human, but how do you remember these insights in the present moment?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I love from, we talked about Ray's book, is he's got an app, right? Like the Pain app or whatever.
Yeah.
Where when these things come up, where, you make a mistake, it's an important mistake if you feel some pain as a consequence, and then you sort of log that, and it basically keeps track of this and reminds you and stuff like that. So it's really interesting how like a very sort of rational, metrics and data-driven person tries to go about it, and it's a bit of a contrast from how I do it. I certainly wouldn't want to take out my phone and log it, but what I do is I sit with it, I think about it, and to what you said, I think is really critical. I don't make it go away, I make a mistake, I feel the pain. Everyone's natural inclination is to try and make it go away. Well, what are ways to make it go away? Well, one is blame someone else, right? That's my preferred method. Pain happened, I'm going to blame someone else, take no responsibility for it. But then I'm like, I'm not going to do that because I won't learn, because I made it go away. Other people may go have an alcohol drink. Other people may eat too much, overeat food. Other people may do some sort of self-blaming strategy, like be really, really hard on themselves, like as a punishment. But all of them are like taking your focus off of the pain that you're feeling because of the mistake. So for me, it's just feel what you're feeling. That's okay. That thing happened. I'm feeling what I'm feeling. I'm not flailing around trying to make it go away or disappear or feel something else. And that's what I think, for me personally, encodes it. So I just remember it. I think also probably someone like you, probably someone like me, uses the embarrassment for having made a mistake, which is okay to feel too. All the feelings are okay. To be like, hey, well, that happened. I did it.
Right.
It's never going to happen again.
Hey guys, if your biggest goal right now is to lose body fat and or build lean muscle mass, then we have something cool for you. And it is called, wait for it, the Brute Body Shred Manual. I know it's a super cool title. So this is a short ebook that includes 27 different tips on building lean muscle mass and losing body fat. It includes a 6-week pull-up progression, some different programming for building lean muscle. We have fat loss myths in here. We talk about how to eat for body composition goals and a ton of different things that you can implement immediately, or just things that are kind of mindset shifts that can help you reach your goals over the long term. And you can get access to this by going to brutestrengthtraining.com/SM, brutestrengthtraining.com/SM. And this is a free guide. Take advantage of it. Hope you enjoy. I've been listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson recently, and I love how he talks about motivation in the way that you want something that you're running away from, as well as something you're kind of sprinting towards. So in this case, we're running from, we want to kind of be, I don't know about afraid, but we want to run away from continuing to make mistakes and being a lesser version of ourselves. And by really experiencing the pain that it causes, we're able to run away from it. And I think another trick is to be clear about next time, how do I want to think about this? How do I want to respond to this? And so we're not just trying to not do something. We're also clear about how we do want to be.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's great. That's great. We sort of, I categorize it sometimes as like bottom feeder versus awesomeness based. Like the bottom feeder is like the how do I not be an idiot next time? Right. And then the awesomeness based is, okay, what's the higher calling next time?
Right.
And I think it fits really well with what you're talking about here.
So I've got a quote from you. I'm not sure where it's from, but it's more of a question that you asked yourself. What is the minimum exercise or nutrition intervention that can move the needle? And this is something that you ask yourself with your clients. Why do you ask that? And how can Yeah, let's start there. Why do you ask this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think about that with everything. It's a question I ask about everything. What's the minimum work input to move the needle? What's the minimum amount of time with my children to move the needle? And that may seem like I'm trying to shortchange them or something, but we all know an hour is not an hour, right? I could spend an hour doing meaningless things with them in which we don't feel connected at all, or we can spend an hour doing highly engaged, relationship building things. And so this is a bit of, on the exercise and nutrition side, there's a pragmatic side and a philosophical side. The pragmatic side is this. Your life is going to not always be the same. So there might be a week where things are good and smooth and easy and you're in steady state and you're like, man, I could totally handle 10 hours of exercise this week, right? But you shouldn't design your exercise program based on your easiest week. You should design it based on your projected hardest week. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I want my baseline of exercise to be the minimum required to achieve the goal, because during some weeks, a whole bunch of stuff's going to go wrong. And then exercise, if my requirement to be successful is 10 hours and I can only budget 5 hours, even if I get 5 hours, I will have considered myself a failure. Well, that's a mistake. And because we know what happens then. People just quit, tap out, give up, or beat themselves up about it. So when it comes to, again, exercise and nutrition, it's design a program for your worst week. And then on your best weeks, just add a little bit in.
Right.
You know what I mean? Add the extra. I'm not saying when you have a great wide open week, only do the minimum. It's just designed for the minimum. Designed for when life is conspiring to prevent you from reaching your goals. And then when life is actually cooperating, ramp it up for a bit, because it's going to dampen down again. It's going to get busy again. And the same thing goes for work, and the same thing goes for relationships. It's how do I make all the minutes count?
Right.
Because I don't know how many minutes I have in general. And on the philosophical side, I think what it forces you to do is make hard trade-offs. I see this at work all the time. Some young people will try and make up for, let's say, lack of skill or experience with just raw horsepower hours, right? And they learn that. And then when they get older and they get experience and they get insight or into the work process, they mistake their success for the hours,
Yes.
And doing more hours, it doesn't, if you're doing 80 hours of the wrong things, it doesn't help. It doesn't help the company. It doesn't help yourself, right? So I'm often trying to engineer scenarios where you force yourself to put in less hours so that you have to decide what's important. What is the most meaningful thing I can do in 30 hours or 40 hours this week? If I only have 30 or 40 hours, am I going to piss them away doing meaningless things? You can. Lots of people do. But I suspect you, me, and the people listening, that's not the path we're on. The path here is, no, I want to do big things, important things, and move the needle. So I think, so it's an artificial construct designed to make you choose better. It plays into this advice of saying no. The most successful people say no to almost everything. Well, I actually look at it slightly differently. I think that's true, but I think that's only correlated with the reason, not the cause. I think what happens when you say no to almost everything is that you force yourself into a scenario where you have to choose the most important things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not about no, it's about the yes. It's about what you're saying the yeses to.
And protecting the yes. Protecting the big yeses.
That's exactly it. So for me, I have logical constraints. I every day I pick up our children at a certain time from school. So when I start work till that point, that's all the hours I get. So is that going to, my question was, as I started this process of having a family, is that going to make me less effective? Because I used to work twice as much. I didn't have a choice though, right? I wanted to still be a high performer. So it was not, let's just wait and see, but how can I engineer this so that my 30 hours are going to be more effective than everyone else's 80 hours. Mm-hmm. I'm going to beat them. Even though they're outworking me by a ratio of 2 or 3 to 1, I'm going to find a way to win. And it made me realize, oh shit, there is a way. There's a way to win using this calculus.
Amazing. One of my favorite things about what you just said is by designing your kind of worst case scenario strategy for going through any discipline, whether it's exercise, nutrition, work habits, etc., by setting that minimum and making it something that you can hit even on your worst week, you're really protecting your integrity and your self-esteem. And so, which are so important for just continuing to do anything to maintain motivation. So that's awesome.
That's a great way of saying it, man. I've never heard anyone say that before, and I haven't used that before, but that's exactly what it is. I love that you are, because I've made this mistake often in my career where, I'd start my day with a list of 10 things I wanted to do. And if I got done 5, I was a big failure.
Right.
And like literally I'd spend the rest of my evening with my family thinking about the 5 things I didn't do, and,
yep.
And I don't think I'm a particularly weak-minded person to be like, hey, JB, try harder. No, I just think that's human nature, right? So then I was like, what if I just flip this? What if I just wrote down the 3 things I have to do, made sure they were the right 3 things? Well, what ended up happening most of the time is I would get done 5 things anyway. And then I felt like the king of the universe. I got to hang out with my kids and have fun. I got done 5 things instead of 3. Objectively, it's no different, but man, it makes a world of difference. And I think it's because what you said, you protect your self-esteem.
I love this quote that I picked up recently. Discipline is your relationship with the time you have left. And I know at PN and in your life, y'all are just huge on habits. It's one of the biggest things that you guys teach. Mm-hmm. So how do you instill habits into your life? If whether you want to get rid of something negative or you want to insert a positive habit, how do you go about that? And how do you think about it?
Yeah, practice, man. I think you have to, the way I usually teach it is you have to construct a little bit of a mental flow chart, right? Where imagine there's a rectangle, at the top of a page with your goal written in it, right? So then you go, okay, cool. There's my goal. It's up there. Great. Now everything I do has to map to that. So, all right, what's below that though? What do I have to do next? I have this goal, but that's meaningless, right? So for me, the idea is that you have to build skills, right? If you aren't achieving a goal right now, whether it's, play an instrument, speak a language, get in great shape, grow a business, it's because you don't have the skills to do it yet. And that's not a problem. It's just the truth. So then underneath that, you have to write down the skills required to achieve that goal. Again, everything's mapping to the goal. But knowing what skills you need isn't enough. You need to practice stuff to get those skills. You need to put your fingers on the piano keys. You have to learn the grammar of the language. You have to learn marketing, sales, org structure, hiring, all that stuff in business. You need to learn what sets and reps to do, or what things to eat in fitness and nutrition. And to do that, you need to practice. You need to practice things. You need to show up. You want to get a great, clean. Cool, you got to practice that. You got to build up the skills required for that. So then it's a matter of laying the practices under each respective skill that maps to the goal. And now you have a really clear pathway. Practice things to build skills to achieve goals. So that's what I do. It's as simple as, cool, what do I have to practice next? What's the next constraint or limiting factor in my ability to build this skill? Okay, good, I'm going to do that every day. It's not any more complicated than that. Now, it's not simple, right? Like, where am I going to fit it in? How am I going to practice? Where am I going to make or find the time? Now, that's a choice you have to make, but the acquisition of the goal is fairly straightforward. Do some stuff every day, the important stuff that builds the next skill that's required to get to the goal. And then, after a couple of weeks of that practice, when you feel like you've got it, then you layer onto it and you do the next thing, and it's our fundamental impatience that makes people not like this process.
Right.
You know, we love to teach it, but when it comes down to us doing it ourselves, we're like, you know what, where's the life hack? You know,
Yep.
help me find the Tim Ferriss 4-hour method for this, you know? And I'm like, no, that's just not how it ever works. It's not how any mastery is ever developed. All mastery, ask any master, is developed through this exact process. You practice things daily that build skills that lead to whatever the goal is. So that's how I think about it, and that's how we teach it. You know, when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to exercise, we want to map that out for every goal and process. So you want to build muscle, you want to lose weight, you want to lower your cholesterol, you want to reshape your body in some way, you want to get stronger. Okay, cool. Fill this chart out for me. What's the goal? Write it down. What skills are you going to need? Write that down. What practices are you going to need? We'll write that down. And then here's the map. This is what you just have to do over the next year to achieve it. I mean, I haven't heard too many people talk about it in this way, but it's exactly how we do it. It's how we write our curriculum. And it's how I personally try and learn anything that I want to learn. If I want to be a better parent, it's the same thing. But it's not just like the general goal of being a better parent. It's there's specific things, you know. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like every couple months, I sit down with each of our kids individually, and I ask them, "Hey, listen, you know, Dad really, really wants to be better as a dad, as a parent, and I need your feedback and I need your help. So, can you help me by just telling me 2 or 3 things that you think I'm doing really well, and 2 or 3 things that you think I could do better?" You know, and then I compile all the feedback from the kids, you know, and our 4-year-old even does this with me. And then I go, okay, great. So being a better parent's not just that nebulous thing. It's actually the things that they said, you know?
Right. What
so
amazing leadership. That is so cool, man.
It's fun, man. It just, and it gives us stuff to do together. It gives us stuff to talk about. It gives them a place to feel like their voice is heard. But it also gives me what I need the most, which is, because I'll be honest, man, when I ask them these things, I usually have some preconceived notions of what they'll say. And the last time I did this, which was a month ago, they told me things that weren't on my list at all.
Wow.
You know, I was like, oh, well, I thought you were going to say these things. And they're like, no, you're good at that. And I was like,
wow.
Oh, all right.
Right.
Cool.
That's why they call it a shadow or a blind spot.
That's exactly right.
Funny.
And then the things that they did say, I thought I was actually good at already.
That's funny, man.
Yeah.
Super cool. I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but just to highlight that leadership one more time, you're modeling for your kids in that scenario, both vulnerability and like just allowing yourself to receive feedback, and then showing them what it looks like to solicit feedback, which is I think of it as like a super skill. If you can solicit feedback and then make it safe for people to do that unprovoked for you in your life, then you're going to get better at such a faster rate. But we walk around just so afraid of getting this feedback a lot of times, or defensive when those close to us give it to us. So that's so cool that you're teaching your kids that at such a young age.
Thanks. It's a good point. You know, if anyone's read Principles from Ray, I mean, I think it's one of the central theses of the entire book, which is learn how to solicit and accept feedback well. You know, and I'm actually writing a book right now, and you know, the transaction and transition that we've had at PN recently has just freed up a bunch of time for me. So I felt like it was time to put all my things that I think I know about health and fitness into a book. And it's an important part of the chapter on reputation for me, because not only does it help you, I mean, it's been my experience that people who grow the fastest are the ones who can do what you just talked about, but they also appear as really great, reputable people. You know what I mean? So there's a double benefit. One is you grow fast, and the other is everyone around you goes, man, that guy's awesome, or that girl's awesome. They take feedback so well, like they're not defensive, they're mature, they're professional. You know, the only challenge that I often talk about, and I write about this, is that when you get so good at this, when you get really, really good at filtering the message, not the style, you know, so you're about the substance over the style, you can become a really bad feedback giver.
Interesting.
You're so focused on the substance, not the style. When other people give it to you, you could forget that almost all of the rest of the world isn't going to have this skill yet.
Right.
So then you're just like, yeah, I don't understand why you're not taking feedback well.
Yes.
And it becomes like a double blame game. That person on the other end is going, I don't understand why you're such an asshole when you give feedback. And you're going, I don't understand why you're not mature enough to take feedback well. And everyone loses, you know?
Right.
So it's one of these things that's sort of been the next level for me, which is I've learned how to get really, really good at feedback. It's not something I have to intentionally practice anymore. I just legitimately crave and love feedback of any kind. The next level practice for me has been the next step up, which is, okay, now learn how to give it well.
Yeah.
And it's not fair, honestly, because you have to do double duty. You have to filter all the incoming feedback, right? So it doesn't affect your ego. And then you have to make sure that you give all outgoing feedback in the most sensitive of ways. Mm-hmm. But we're not talking about being average here. We're talking about being exceptional, and that just means doing double the work.
Right. So I've got a few kind of more technical nutrition.
Yeah, let's do it. We haven't talked about food or exercise at all. I understand that. For those bearing with us, God bless you. Thank you for listening to my random philosophy.
People are going to love this shit. So there's just an enormous amount of information on gut health coming out in the last 10 to 20 years. What, in your opinion, what's if we're talking about the Pareto principle, the 20% of inputs that create 80% of the results or outputs, what are the 20% of things that people can be focused on to make the biggest difference in their gut health?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, for me, I think it's like going to be the most boring answer ever. Sorry, everyone, but it's the same stuff you already know to do. If you are eating the kind of diet we know that we all should be eating, which is a varied diet with vegetables and largely unprocessed foods and enough protein and healthy fats. It's probably the most guaranteed way, unless you have some kind of clinical abnormality, to maintain a healthy gut function. You get your naturally occurring pre and probiotics and from certain foods and potentially even some supplements, even though that's kind of questionable still. And exercise, right? I mean, I feel like the old saying is like, you have to, like, if you're going to grow, let's say crops or whatever, you have to make sure you start with a fertile soil, right? Because it doesn't matter how much water you pour on or sunlight that gets on it. If the soil's not good and tended to and prepared, then the rest nothing matters. So I think about that, and I think what that means for me is that your body has to be working in a healthy and functional way. And how do you get a body working in a healthy and functional way? Through adequate sleep, stress management, regular exercise, and good food choices. Now, I'm not saying that will directly impact gut function, although it might. What I'm saying is that it creates a body that can do what it needs to support healthy gut function, to support healthy immune function. You know what I mean? And this is some of the problem, I think, with a reductionist kind of approach to health and fitness. Even some of the really evidence-based kind of conversation that's happening now, where it's like, look at the science for specific prescriptions and then do those prescriptions, right? Because I don't suspect they have the highest probability of working unless they have a really, really powerful effect without the holistic sort of preparation of the soil. Mm-hmm. And it's a subtle concept, but really, again, the point is the body knows how to recover. It knows how to heal itself. It knows how to maintain a healthy gut function. It knows how to do all the things that we're like, oh, things are going badly on. In general, again, unless you have some clinical pathology. But it can only do it if you give it all the raw materials for success there, which is movement and stress management and sleep and healthy food. So rather than being like, hey, do I take a probiotic or do I eat more sauerkraut or whatever?
Yeah.
Right. The question is, well, how does a healthy gut emerge in the first place? Well, and the answer is the whole body has to be working well so that it's not stressed or having a whole bunch of problems managing basic functions. So then it just like doesn't worry too much about the gut part, you know? So that's the best we have today. Now, in the future, I'm sure some powerful discoveries will be made that give us more clues on individual microbiome and interventions for that, and also environmental things that may affect it. You know, I feel like, you know, the scourge of sort of our parents' generation was heart disease. Right? Everyone, that was the boogeyman, you know? And the scourge now is cancer, obviously, right? It's what we just feel like every time we pop open Facebook, 3 more people we know have it. And so the question, you know, people are always looking for, you know, what treatment or what caused it or whatever. And the thing is, I think we're going to discover something down the line that we didn't expect is what caused this increase. You know, it's probably not exactly how we're eating or how we're exercising. Now, only in that those things could have helped by creating a body that could have fought the cancer better. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But there was something, and it could be something crazy, like, I don't know, from the year 1998 to 2018, every carpet in North America used some kind of carpet glue. You know what I mean? Or whatever, right? Something. And I think we'll learn some stuff like that about the gut as well. But right now there's a lot of speculation about what kind of supplements to use or what kind of foods will alter microbiome function. And lots of people are measuring their microbiome, right? They're measuring it in all different places. So you measure it from your poo, or you measure it from your armpits, or wherever. And I think it's fascinating, and I think it's intriguing, and I've done it myself. But, you know, the research is coming out that loads of, let's say, probiotic interventions or whatever aren't necessarily altering the gut microbiome. And if they are, in some cases they are, we're not even sure what that means, right? We're like, your microbiome was this yesterday, and then you took these pills and it changed.
It's different.
Yeah, that's right. That's all you can say. It's different. You're like, wait, is it different good or different bad? Right. Well, we're not sure. Because we don't know what a good microbiome profile looks like or how individual it is to the person. Like, maybe a good microbiome, if you live in Austin, Texas, like you do, is different from a good microbiome if you live in Ontario, Canada, like I do. And it's different if you live in South America. Right. You know, like, that could be a conceivable hypothesis because of the quality of the water you're taking in, and the food, and the microbiome in your environment. You know, it can't be the same in all 3 places. So this is the stuff we don't know, which sucks, because we're like, hey, we discovered something really new, this microbiome stuff and how important it is. And we want to know more, you know? Right. And the thing I often say that's sad, Mike, is we probably won't know it in our lifetime. Like, you and I will die before this problem is solved. Mm-hmm. Before we know enough about it.
I doubt that, because I think by the time, I don't think you and I will die. I think we'll have the Neuralink connected to us and we'll live to infinity.
That's right. Well, if only they figure out how to manage our microbiome in time.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, if we put enough sauerkraut on our McDonald's hamburgers and wash it down with kombucha, we're good to go.
Good to go, man. Absolutely. That's exactly what I said.
Awesome. What are your biggest tips for people who travel and have a hard time staying on track, whatever dietary habits that they have when they're home?
Simplify, like go back to what we talked about earlier, right? So when you're traveling, lower the bar. Like rarely when you're traveling are you like, yeah, I got nothing to do while I'm here. You know what I mean? Like if you're going on travel for work, you're busier. You know, if you're going to travel for vacation, you're doing whatever, hang gliding, or I don't know, whatever you do on your vacations. So that it's busy then. So the idea of having to stay on whatever you're doing at home while you're traveling is fundamentally flawed and absurd in the first place, right? It's going to get busier when you're away. So therefore, what's the minimum dose required? For me, like usually what I'll do if I'm traveling and it's a busy schedule is go, hey, I only need to go work out 3 times this week. And what I'm going to do is if I'm at a hotel or whatever, I'll do interval sprints on the treadmill with pull-ups and push-ups in between. So I'll sprint for like 30 seconds, jump off, do push-ups, then do some pull-ups, take 30-second rest, do it again, and I'll nail 15 minutes of that. And then that's all I do while I'm away. Is it perfect? Is it as good as at home? No, but I'm only gone for a couple weeks, and it's sufficient. It's better than the other alternative, which is nothing at all. Right. So number one is on the exercise front, just simplify it. Sometimes, so what I do with my kids is when they turn 5, we have this family ritual, which is they get to pick a place and they get to go with me only, anywhere they want for a week. It's their sort of 5-year-old rite of passage. And so when I go with them, I'm not going to the gym or whatever. So what I just do is usually wake up 15 minutes before they wake up and do a little circuit in the hotel room. Or if they wake up too, we do a little circuit together.
Nice.
So it's that kind of thing. It's just like, and what I do, and I think this is really critical, and I don't want anyone to gloss over it, is I plan this in advance. Right. If you wait till you're on the road to be like, what am I going to do today? I'm going to have to figure it out. You're less likely to do it. So I go, hey, I got a trip coming up. Everyone knows if they're about to travel generally. So I go, what am I going to do this week? Okay, cool. I'm going to probably only work out 3 times. If I get 4, that's fine. And I got the kids with me, so I can't escape to the gym. So I guess it's going to be a hotel room workout. When am I going to do it? I'll try to wake up before they wake up, and then do it that way, or whatever. The parameters generally, so you set it that way. And then when it comes to nutrition, what I often do when traveling is I often just skip breakfast. I'll just eat lunch and dinner. So it's a way to calorie manage when some of the variables are maybe not going to be as well controlled. If we're staying in a place where there's a little kitchen or whatever, I'll try and just eat what I do at home. But if there's not, and I'm just going to be eating at restaurants, then what I do is I just calorie manage by eating less frequently. I'm already exercising less. So it's like I probably have to eat less while I'm away. So now I'll just skip breakfast and eat lunches and dinners. And then that's, so it's just, again, it's all reduction.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like bringing it back to the simplification. Put the bar low enough that you can succeed. Everything else is a bonus. Yeah, that's totally it. And it's none of this has ever affected me negatively in terms of travel, like deconditioning me or whatever. But in fairness, I'm not trying to win an Olympic lifting competition now or CrossFit Games or whatever. So right. If that's you, then obviously your scenario is going to have to be a little different. Sure. John, you have time for 2 more questions?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Awesome, man. How do you instill good eating habits in your children? Maybe also talk about what the 1 or 2 or 3 biggest things that you're trying to instill in them are.
Yeah, that's great. I like that follow-up question a lot. For us, at home, people maybe expect we to be stricter or trying to be a little more ambitious because of what I do. I'm running a nutrition company and having a PhD in the field. But for us, our goals are get them eating protein and get them eating vegetables. That's it.
Got it.
What about sugar? No, we don't worry about that too much. What about processed foods? No, we don't worry about that too much, although we don't have a lot in the house. So it's not like a big, we don't eat processed foods, they kill you kids. But it's just like, where are you going to get some? You know what I mean?
Yep.
The other day, someone was asking Amelin if she likes cereal, and she's our 8-year-old. And she was like, oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Nice.
I've never had any. Am I missing out on something? And they were like, actually, no. You know what I mean? How would you argue? Oh yeah, no, Fruit Loops are delicious and extremely satisfying. No one eating Fruit Loops is these are a real treat for the palate. Yeah. It's just it's a sugar bomb. So we don't have a lot of that kind of stuff at the house. But for us, it's just mostly the idea of regular exposure starting when they can eat food, which is generally 9 months or 11 months or something like that of age. Some people try various foods sooner, but like if we're talking about like actually chewing a cucumber, for example, it's probably around 9 months or so of age. Just exposing them to vegetables and fruits and meat and various sources of protein and eggs. So our kids have just always, ate those things since they could chew. And so now it's not a thing really. Now our second child his name's Raylan and he's 6. He's, if you want to call it, like our pickiest eater. But we just found the fruits and vegetables he likes and we give him those. So he likes red peppers. He likes cucumbers. Sometimes he likes salads. He likes apples. He likes oranges. So there's just like a limit, like 6 or 8 fruits and vegetables that he likes. And he doesn't really like too many others. We just give him those all the time, but on the protein side, he'll eat anything. Like I remember he went to camp when he was 4, and the camp counselor, who now is a good friend of ours, was still like talks about it. She's like, I'll never forget the day when we were at lunch at camp and Raylan, 4-year-old, just holds up a bag of chicken that he had in his lunch. And he's like, I love protein. And
that's the dream.
That's right.
Great.
So that's really it for us, and generally, you're feeding your kids. Like we're feeding our kids. Like our 4-year-old isn't like, I'm going to cook what I want. Forget you guys.
Right.
So generally our meals, breakfast, lunches, and dinners are mostly fruits, vegetables, and protein. It might be meatballs, it might be chicken, it might be pork chops, it might be ribs, whatever. And then it's vegetables and some fruits. But that's not because we're like a low carb family or whatever, but it's because they're like kids will find carbs.
Right.
Kids find carbs everywhere. You know what I mean? You'll stop at a grocery store parking lot and another family will pull up next to you in a minivan or whatever, and you'll stop and talk to them for 2 minutes, and all of a sudden you drive away and your kids have handfuls of like fishy crackers. You're like, how did this transaction even take place?
Yes.
So kids will find carbs everywhere during the day.
That's their unique genius.
That's right. So for us, it's just like, great, well then let's just not have a lot of them at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so that, by the end of the day, they'll have a mixed diet with plenty of protein, vegetables, fats, and carbohydrates. But we know they're getting the carbs already, a nice baseline of them. So then the rest comes from protein, veggies, and some fruits. And that's just, we take fish oil in the morning, and the kids were like, hey, if you're going to take that, you guys give us some, so we have a nice raspberry flavored fish oil. So it's pretty low key, man. There's not a lot of nutrition lecturing in our house. There's none of that. We just provide options. And one thing I've learned from Amanda, she's amazing as a mom and just as a teacher and as a child manager, if you will. For her it's just don't make things a big deal. Like when you make things a big deal, they take on like an unnecessary importance, and then there are things that people can push back against. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You create a big block of nutrition belief, people are going to push back against that. It's a thing to grasp onto. So if the kids are like, nah, I don't like vegetables, you go, oh, that's okay, honey. Here, have this green pepper. It's not a vegetable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you just be super fluid. There's nothing to push against. Everything is, it's okay, honey. Mm-hmm. Just have this thing. For a while there, Raylan only liked chicken. So steak became pink chicken. Pork chops became white chicken. Salmon. That's all it was. It was not.
Oh, that's great, dude.
It's not a battle. Like, don't give people something to resist against. You know what I mean?
That is funny.
Yeah, so that's just our the practical side of the philosophy. It's the goal is just, hey, make sure they get protein and veggies.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep on.
And then the application side is just, man, this can't be so important to you as a parent because you clutch onto it and I got to teach them a lesson. It's my job to make sure they well, that's when you create these like dinner time battles that no one has any fun at, and they don't work anyway. It's the utility is completely nil. So it's just this, and again, I would have been that way. I learned this from Amanda, who's great at this. She she's always twisting and bending and moving, so there's nothing to resist against.
God, that's great advice. My nephew is 4 now, and when he was somewhere around 1, I started indoctrinating him on the importance of protein. And, I'd flex my muscles and make a big deal out of being strong. And every time I'll FaceTime, because they live in Louisiana, every time I'll FaceTime with him, I'll kind of check on what he's eating and praise him if he's eating protein. So he really doesn't love it, but he does like the validation.
Right.
When he eats it. And so we're going to throw in some pink chicken, white chicken. That's such a great idea.
That's right. And the other philosophy that I've had, and like Amanda hates when I talk about this publicly. She's like, it makes us sound neglectful or whatever. But whatever. The other thing is like, if they're not going to eat, they don't have to eat. You know what I mean? Like, our kids are extremely active. If they're going to resist lunch, I'm not going to make them another lunch.
Yeah.
Just be like, oh, no, that's cool. If you're not hungry now, buddy, we'll just eat at dinner together.
Right.
And it's like,
they'll get hungry and then eat, right?
Yeah, they're gonna get hungry. And I remember there was one point where, again, Ray, who's our pickiest eater, I should say, didn't eat for like 2 days. And Amanda's like, oh my God, JB, like, are we neglectful or whatever? And I was like, no, he's gonna eat. He's gonna eat. He's gonna get hungry eventually, and he'll eat. And he did, and that was actually one of the last times that we ever had that kind of situation, because it was just a lesson, right? It was just like, oh. And the truth is, I'm sure the food tasted fine to him when he ate it. I'm sure it tasted awesome after not eating for 2 days, right? So it's if it went on for 5 days, I'm pretty sure that we wouldn't have let that persist. But and again, it wasn't like, then you're gonna starve,
Yeah.
It was just like, oh no, that's okay, buddy. No, I know you're really, really hungry, but this is the food that we eat here,
Right.
I can make you apples. Would you like apples? No, I don't want apples. Okay, no problem. How about some cucumbers? No, I don't want cucumbers. How about some chicken? No, I don't want. Okay, cool. Well, then we'll just try again at dinner, all right? And then eventually came around. So, there you have to use a little bit of obvious judgment to make sure you're not doing neglect.
Right.
But at the same time, if you get hungry enough, you'll eat. They get hungry enough, they'll eat. If they learn, though, through that process that they can just have a little bit of a fuss and get whatever they want, that's another life lesson that maybe isn't a good one,
Right.
But again, Amanda's always like, be careful when you tell people that, because there's some people out there that are pretty black and white, and they'll just start starving their kids. So don't do that, listeners. You know what I mean? The idea is just to be really, really tuned in, and then again, not so authoritarian about it. Like, I don't think anyone would have watched what we were doing and been like, those mean parents are starving their kids. We were just super supportive, but also not giving into the demands of a 4-year-old,
Right. Such great advice, man. My last question for you is, what is a question that you're currently asking yourself? And put another way, what are you currently working on or towards in your personal life?
So, one is very, like, obviously context specific. We had this big shift at Precision Nutrition last year, where I'm no longer sort of a majority owner, and still involved, but not as much. So, the one big question is, what do I want to do when I grow up?
Yes.
Probably within the next 4 years or so, I will have hired out all the roles that I was doing previously. So I'm going to have just this nice block of time. So a lot of my questions right now, and I'm so blessed and fortunate to be in a position to be asking them, is, what's next? If I'm not the nutrition guy, what will I be? Like, if that JB, co-founder of Precision nutrition expert, whatever, if that identity is something that I'm going to, I call it my Dr. John Berardi persona. Mm-hmm. If the Dr. John Berardi persona retires, what am I going to be? what is next for me? What's important? What do I want to work on? Is there a different legacy I want to work on, or what I just want to continue with this one? So that's sort of a very context specific one, and then the other stuff is not to start turning this into a political podcast or whatever, but with some of the things that are happening right now in terms, what's happening in the U.S. with politics and with not only politics, but just sort of issues around gender and issues around race. I'm asking myself a lot, what kind of role do I want to play in those? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I have a pretty big platform. We have, our email list is nearly 1 million people. Mm-hmm. People follow what I have to say on these things. And I don't think I'd throw my hat in the political realm. That's not interesting to me. Nor am I going to be maybe an advocate or a crusader or an activist for any of these causes. But at the same time, I think, let's say in health and fitness, for example, there's an opportunity to do better on both counts. To foster and champion inclusiveness for all kinds, you know what I mean? Not the least of which is just women for the first place, and then people of color, and then people with various abilities and disabilities, and then on the other hand, a lot of the discussion around gender topics today focuses on women, which I think very rightfully so. And I've been talking about this a lot with Phil, and we kind of share the same opinion on this, which is a lot of guys who are showing up to this party positively, are saying things like, hey, well, I have a mom and I have a sister and I have daughters. And so I really want a better world for them. And what I just keep thinking is, though, I've got a dad and I've got brothers and I have sons. And yes, I want it to be a better world for the girls, and I want it to be a better world for the boys. But I think it's the boys that are the ones who can help shape that better world, right? Right. So what can I do to help the boys? What can I do to help the men in my life show up and start to create the kind of world that embraces and accepts women, people with differences, stuff like that. So that's a big question for me, which is, this is important to me. And I know as soon as these topics come up, people go, oh, he must be a lefty, you know what I mean, or whatever. Yes. But that's not true. I'm the most sort of moderate on the political spectrum that you can imagine. Like, I look at some of the things on the right and I look at some of the things on the left, and I'm like, man, can I just pick and choose what I think is right and moral and shares my values? Mm-hmm. So this isn't me actually picking a political position at all. It's just me going, man, wouldn't it be a cool world if we liked each other and valued each other and made space for each other? And I think it actually starts with the boys and the men that I'm close to. It starts with me, the boys and the men that I'm close to, and then helping other men along the way. Like, how can we have a space where men are still respected and valued, but make space for women to be respected and valued, and people who are different to be respected and valued? So that's another question for me that's really important right now in my life that I'm asking a lot. Like, what does this look like? What does it mean? I suspect a lot of people are asking this. I heard a great quote, which is, everyone's kind of flailing around right now because the old stories that we had about the world feel like they're no longer working. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's exactly what's happening. And we can characterize it in different ways, but the old stories about the world are no longer working. They're no longer serving us, and no one has the new stories yet. So everyone's stuck in the middle. And I'm like, hey, I'm pretty good at telling stories, Man. So can I be of service here?
What a fucking mission, John. Awesome, dude. Not there aren't many better people to be on that path than you. That's awesome.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Well, we did it, man. I think this one is even better than the first. Thank you so much for your time. Remind people where they can find you and learn more about how they can work with you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. I mean, precisonnutrition.com is where we do what we do. The website has, I don't know, I was looking at it the other day,
And I was like, we have like 1,200 free articles on our site or something like that, between
It's ridiculous.
articles and
It's really ridiculous.
infographics and videos and stuff like that. So, you know, you don't have to come buy anything. I mean, it's if you're really interested in the kind of the things we talked about today, where sort of like this like life philosophy meets food and fitness. That's where we do that, and we publish a lot of free stuff for people to read there. And then, you know, then I post occasionally on Facebook, which is Dr. John Berardi. You know, I've actually cut back on that quite a bit lately, just as I learned to prioritize my time a little better. I realized that's kind of low on the priority list, but it's also because I'm writing this book, right? I'm writing several thousand words a day as it is. And so, you know, when that comes out, I'll be sure to let everyone know through the Precision Nutrition newsletter and whatever else. I suspect that'll be sometime in 2019. But yeah, I mean, come visit us at PN if you want to learn how to eat, move, and live better, if stress management, if sleep, if, you know, nutrition and exercise are important to you. I think you'll find some people who share the same values.
Yeah, guys, go check out the especially the infographics on the site. They are, you know, I love reading, and I also don't learn best by reading. And so, like, you guys have such long form, like some of the biggest infographics I've ever seen. So you're teaching these really in-depth lessons with pictures and graphs and diagrams, and it just clicks a lot faster. And there's tons of them. It's awesome, man. So go check that out, guys. John, thank you so much, brother. Great
All
talking
right,
to you.
thank you too. Thanks, Mike. Bye, everyone.
This episode is finished, but your training journey continues. Head over to brutestrengthtraining.com/SSW and grab your free pack of 32 accessory workouts that you can incorporate into your training and start improving your strength immediately. That's brutestrengthtraining.com/SSW.